Welcome back to Geoscope, where we decode the geopolitics behind today's shifting global order. As the European Union secures a quick 15% tariff deal with Washington, Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, is charting a very different path. No rushed compromises, no flashy wins. Instead, Ottawa is playing the long game, anchoring strategy on national interests and the looming 2026 USMCA review. In this video, we break down Canada's calculated patience, Trump's mixed messaging, and how provinces and partners are adapting in real time. Because what looks like hesitation may be Canada's sharpest move yet. Canada's tactical gambit, staying the course. In the months following Trump's return, the European Union opted for pragmatic speed. Wary of a trade war, Brussels accepted tariffs in exchange for market stability, a compromise to avoid chaos. But across the Atlantic, Canada refused to be rushed, viewing the EU's deal as a short-term fix with long-term costs. Prime Minister Mark Carney, a former central banker, dismissed the approach as a deal for the cameras, arguing it sacrificed sovereignty for temporary relief. Instead, his government announced a strategy of strategic patience, a calculated gamble that Canada's fundamental economic advantages were more powerful than any tariff threat. The cornerstones of this strategy were deeply embedded in the North American economy. First, integrated supply chains. In the auto sector, parts cross the border multiple times before a vehicle is finished, meaning a tariff on Canada is a direct hit to factories in Ohio and Michigan. Second was Canada's role as a secure energy supplier. And third, the legal framework of the USMCA itself, which Ottawa prepared to use as both a shield and a sword. The test came swiftly. Citing national security, the White House used the fentanyl crisis as a thin pretext for a punishing 35% tariff on Canadian goods. Carney's response was immediate and surgical. In a televised address, he dismantled the pretext, presenting intelligence that showed over 99% of illicit fentanyl originated elsewhere. He reframed the tariff not as a security measure, but as a purely protectionist attack. He then laid out a clear counter-strategy, using every legal tool under the USMCA to challenge the tariffs, while preparing retaliatory measures targeting politically sensitive U.S. districts. He also announced an acceleration of Canada's market diversification efforts. The message was clear: Canada would not be bullied. This was the fundamental difference: Europe's sprint versus Canada's marathon. Ottawa chose to manage uncertainty, using its economic and legal leverage as pace-setters. The finish line wasn't a quick deal, but the mandatory USMCA joint review scheduled for 2026. Every action was designed to build maximum leverage for that critical moment. Trump's trade double clutch, mixed signals. But navigating this path meant deciphering Washington's intentions. The signals were a study in contradiction. Publicly, President Trump was dismissive, classic political theater. Privately, U.S. trade officials described talks as constructive. This disconnect created a strategic vacuum. Carney's team moved to exploit it. While Washington projected chaos, Ottawa projected calm competence. The unified front of Carney, Dominic LeBlanc, and Ambassador Kirsten Hillman became a powerful asset, presenting Canada as the stable, reliable partner in a relationship defined by American unpredictability. Testing the chassis, Canada's economy under strain. The first economic salvos have been fired, and Canada finds itself directly in the crosshairs. The initial shockwave was designed for maximum impact, targeting the very pillars of the nation's industrial heartland. Steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber were hit hardest. These aren't just commodities. They are the vital arteries of a deeply integrated North American manufacturing ecosystem. For decades, parts and materials have flowed seamlessly across the border. Now that flow is being constricted. The tariffs weren't just a tax, they were a direct assault on this symbiotic relationship, sending tremors through entire communities built around these industries, from the smelters of Quebec to the forests of British Columbia. The strategy was one of escalation. First, a blanket 25% tariff, then a targeted increase to 35% on key exports. A punitive 40% penalty was slapped on any goods suspected of being rerouted through third countries to circumvent the duties. This created chaos and uncertainty, forcing Canadian businesses into a frantic calculus of cost and risk. And yet, in the face of this economic barrage, the initial damage reports were surprisingly mild. The Canadian economy didn't crack, it barely flinched. GDP dipped a mere 0.1% in April, defying economists' predictions of a much sharper contraction. The reason was a classic case of strategic foresight. Knowing the tariffs were coming, Canadian firms went into overdrive, preloading and shipping months' worth of inventory into the US market before the hammer fell. It was a clever, short-term maneuver that created a deceptive calm. Ottawa, for its part, didn't stand idle. It responded with a three-pronged strategy. First, carefully calibrated countermeasures. Dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs on a list of symbolic American goods, designed to apply maximum political pressure with minimum collateral damage to Canadian consumers. Second, financial life support. The government established tariff loan facilities, offering low-interest capital to help affected businesses absorb the initial cost of the duties and avoid immediate layoffs. Finally, a long-term structural fix, fast-tracking the One Canadian Economy Act, a landmark piece of legislation aimed at dismantling long-standing trade barriers between provinces, hoping to create a more robust and self-reliant domestic market. For now, Canada appears bruised but remarkably resilient. But the pre-shipped inventories are finite, and government loans are a temporary stopgap, not a permanent solution. The real test of the nation's economic chassis will come as these buffers fade. The true grinding impact of the tariffs is expected to deepen throughout 2025, revealing the real cracks in the foundation. Provinces hit the gas, a fractured response. While Ottawa attempts to navigate the crisis with diplomatic caution, Canada's powerful provinces facing immediate pressure on the ground are refusing to wait. This has triggered a wave of regional pushback, with provincial governments acting fast and often in conflicting directions to protect their own economic interests. In Ontario, Premier Doug Ford is openly pivoting, pursuing stronger economic ties with China as a direct counterweight to American protectionism. It's a pragmatic, if controversial, move. The effects are already visible. Facing tariffs on American aluminum, some of Ontario's iconic breweries are now sourcing their cans from China, prioritizing supply chain stability over geopolitical alignment. Out west, Alberta is considering a more combative approach, weighing its own retaliatory tariffs against specific U.S. states to leverage its energy clout. Meanwhile, Quebec, historically wary of over-reliance on any single partner, is accelerating its strategy of diversification, aggressively seeking new contracts and partnerships in the European Union and Asia for its key aerospace and technology sectors. This provincial divergence reflects a seismic shift in national sentiment. For the first time in modern history, polls show over 90% of Canadians support actively reducing the country's economic dependence on the United States. This isn't just a top-down policy shift, it's a grassroots movement. Boycott campaigns gain traction online, and new consumer apps that identify Canadian-made products are empowering shoppers to vote with their wallets. A made-in-Canada ethos, once a niche sentiment, is now being reinforced daily at the checkout counter, fundamentally reshaping the nation's economic identity. Eyes on the apex. The 2026 USMCA review. The ink on the USMCA is barely dry, but its most critical test is on the horizon. This isn't a routine check-in. It's a moment of maximum leverage built into the treaty's architecture, a high-stakes game where the future of North American trade will be decided. The real power play is still ahead, the 2025-2026 USMCA review. It all comes down to Article 34.7, the Sunset Clause. Every 6 years, all three nations must unanimously agree to extend the deal. If just one country says no, a 10-year termination clock starts ticking. This clause, originally a U.S. demand, has ironically become Canada's most powerful bargaining chip. Mark Carney sees this as Canada's moment to rebalance the scales. If the U.S. pushes for tighter supply chain rules, Ottawa has a potent response. They can counter that the unilateral steel and aluminum tariffs of the past already eroded trust. The argument becomes a powerful question: why should Canada commit to deeper integration when the U.S. has proven willing to weaponize trade policy for domestic gain? The memory of those tariffs is no longer a wound, it's a shield. But this leverage only works with credible alternatives. That's why Ottawa has been executing a multi-year strategy of diversification. The key pillar is the CPTPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Pact. It's creating new economic arteries to fast-growing Asian markets like Japan and Vietnam, reducing Canada's reliance on the U.S. and making the threat to reject a USMCA extension far more credible. Beyond Asia, Canada is deepening ties with Europe through its CETA trade deal and exploring new economic security pacts. This is friendshoring in action, building resilient supply chains with trusted democratic partners. It's a strategy that mirrors France's push for strategic autonomy within the EU, a shared understanding that in a world of giants, Having options is the ultimate form of sovereignty. This patient approach is a reminder that stability may yield more than quick political wins. Final verdict: Canada's patience is precision. Ultimately, Canada's refusal to engage in loud, retaliatory rhetoric wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Where the EU sought headlines, Ottawa quietly built structural leverage. Trump's erratic messaging, while chaotic, gave Canadian diplomats cover to maneuver and secure key details. At the same time, a powerful realignment was happening at home. Provinces diversified their economies faster than predicted. From Quebec's aerospace sector linking with Europe to British Columbia's ports humming with Asian trade, this grassroots resilience strengthens Ottawa's hand. With the USMCA review on the horizon, all these threads come together. Canada's measured approach wasn't about waiting, it was about preparing. Now that patience is about to be converted into power. What do you think? Will Canada's slow play strategy deliver when the USMCA review arrives? Or will the pressure from its southern neighbor prove too great? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to Geoscope.